For our webinar today, we have Lenin here, Lenin Aboagye. He's a security veteran and who has addressed the program or set up security and privacy programs at a number of Fortune 500 companies. So Lenin, would you want to just quickly give a quick background about yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So this is Lenin here. Several years in the security field, have done multiple of these kinds of engagements, especially from the data security to data privacy. And in my current role with Cogni, the the focus really is on data privacy, and the goal is really to build a data privacy product and data security product that actually works. So I'll hand over to Avinash to give much further clarification on what the topic what the topic is about and what we intend to actually go over today.
Thank you, Lenin. Let's get started. So the topic for today, basically, right, as part of webinar today, we intend to cover or discuss data privacy and data security. So when we talk about data privacy, data security, data governance, compliance, there is a lot of confusion among the folks in the industry, even within the security and privacy teams. Data privacy and security are two essential components of a successful data protection strategy. Most of the time, people actually tend to mix up privacy and security. Those are some of the things I think we will like to clarify, dispel the misconceptions, what falls under security, what falls under privacy, and those are some things that we would want to address as part of our discussion today. So when we talk about data privacy and data security, right, a lot of times it comes down to what is the data that's being protected, who are we protecting this data from, and who's ultimately responsible for that data protection. So let's get going and try to get a few more points about what exactly is the data security. So Lenin, can you walk us through what exactly is data security?
Yeah, absolutely. So data security fundamentally deals with protection of data. And when you look in throughout the trend of data security regulations and data security standards from HIPAA, PCI, ISO, SOC 1, SOC 2, you basically see that there's a lot of focus on how to protect how to protect data. And when you look at data, the data is basically the lifeblood of every organization. If you took out the data that most organizations had today, those organizations would literally cease to exist. And data can be in whatever format or shape that you're actually looking at. It can be data about customers. It can be marketing data. It can also even be intellectual property data. So what we are actually trying to do today is to be able to try and understand what data security is, and basically how to be able to get that understanding, merge that with data privacy, and then be able to put a much stringent and much better program around that. The first point that we would want to discuss is the fact that data security relies on protecting personal data from unauthorized third-party access or malicious attacks and exploitation of data. One of the things that we also need to look at when it comes to data security is you're always concerned about someone being able to exploit your environment. All of the tools that we have today, from perimeter security all the way to internal security, to even the things that we are talking about in terms of zero trust and other forms of security paradigm shifts, are all intended to protect the data of the companies that we actually deal with. The second thing that we would also, the key item that you would also want to look at is data security is not really just about the data that, it's not just about the data that is being stored. It's also about the data, not just the storage. If you look at PCI, the focus really is about not just the data storage, it's about data in motion, data at rest, and even in processing, how that data is being processed. And all of this, the fundamental key driver around this is how do you protect the data throughout the entire state, end-to-end life cycle protection of data. That is really the fundamental thing that you're looking at. And some of the things that are actually done is in terms of policies, you actually enact policies. You put together different methods from encryption to ensuring that authentication, authorization, all of these things actually come together to be able to build a strong capability to protect or secure data in your environment. For data security, for the most part, is more focused on from the organization's perspective, not really about protecting the customer rights. And that is one thing that you'd actually see as we delve a little bit deeper into data privacy. When most organizations talk about data security, they are talking about protecting the data that they hold, data that is valuable to them, data that if was lost or stolen or anything of that nature could be detrimental to the function of their business. So the focus on data security is on the function of the business. The last item that we'd want to look at is before you actually even start a data privacy program, the first thing you would want to start dealing with is ensuring you have the basic and fundamental controls in place to be able to actually address that. So I'll hand the question that I would actually really turn over to Avinash is to go a little bit more deeper into, okay, so we've talked about data security. We are protecting the customer. We are protecting the data that would make the company run. How is the thinking, how is the mindset going to shift when it comes to data privacy?
Thank you, Lenin. Thanks for the quick walkthrough on what all goes into data security. So coming to privacy, right? What exactly is privacy? So privacy is an individual's right to freedom from intrusion and prying eyes or the right of a person to be left alone. So in a lot of that is something that is guaranteed in a lot of countries as part of the constitution itself, and it is even considered as one of the fundamental human rights and one of the core principles of human dignity, an idea that most people agree with. So what exactly is privacy? Whenever we talk about the privacy, right, we are talking about the data that actually belongs to the individual. It could be their personal information, it could be their name, address, uh, preferences, what are the things that they did, all the anything that data that actually belongs or can be associated with an individual is considered the individual's data. So basically, right. So privacy is one of the rights, right to freedom from in a lot of countries. So basically, whenever you are trying to install an application or trying to agree or sign up for a service, there is something that you go in and sign up saying that, okay, you are giving information to the company, and then you are also agreeing to the saying like how the data will be used by the individual that is capturing the data. So primarily, right, data privacy is concerned with ensuring that sensitive data and organization processes, stores and transmits, is ingested and is compliant and with the consent of the owner of the sensitive data. So what that means is when you are going and using a service, you're actually giving your data to that company that's offering you the service. And you're actually even obligated by signing up all these terms and contracts. What you're saying is, okay, you're agreeing to how the company is going to use the data, and how and when or why the data is being collected from you. So basically, right, in this digital technology landscape, right, there are a couple of things that are standing out. For example, if you there are terms that are getting coined because of all these privacy related initiatives. Something called as a digital footprint or a digital exhaust. So if basically, right, everywhere you go, you are actually leaving out a footprint of what and where you are, and what are you doing there. For example, if you have a cell phone, you go and take a cell phone and go to a specific location. The all the data about where all you're going and where all is being getting tracked by your cell phone, and all that information is being collected. For example, be it Google or be it an iPhone, all the data is being collected by all these companies, and then they can actually use the data for whatever means. In the sense that, right, understanding a lot of these companies, be it Google, Facebook, or any of these social networks, they have been collecting all the data about you, and you would be surprised to know that they know more about you than yourself. So a lot of this data that they're collecting actually can be misused. And that's where the privacy regulations or the privacy of an individual comes into play. So one of the things, right, when we talk about privacy, what we are talking about is making sure that there is a proper transparency on what kind of information is getting collected by companies that you're working with. What information, how is that information going to be used? So all those are some things that fall under the category of a privacy. So one other thing, right? One other thing to add in here is when we talk about data security, we are only concerned about how to make sure that we are protecting or making sure that data is only only being accessed by people that who are supposed to access. But when we come to privacy, we are talking about who will have access to the data that the organizations already have within their data stores. So primarily, right, data privacy is about a proper usage, collection, retention, deletion, and proper storage of data within an enterprise. Privacy efforts, right, when we talk about privacy efforts within an enterprise, they include things like linking of identifying where all your sensitive data is, making sure that the sensitive data that they have is properly cataloged and it properly tracked, and whenever there are ways where this data needs to be used, has the data been properly de-identified, or what exactly are you going to be using the data for, things like those. So again, right, that's where some of these items, when we talk about be it data privacy or data security, they are both about the data in general. Data, whose data? Data could be it's a data of a customer. It could be data of your employees or data of people that are a third party that's collecting the data from you. So, Lenin, can you help us understand or let us know how both data security and data privacy converge or diverge from an enterprise standpoint?
Yeah, so when we come to data privacy, as mentioned, is more focused on the individual rights. So the whoever it is that is given the data to any organization is given a set of um, transparency type items in terms of tell me, we are going to tell you what we're going to use your data for. And the rights, those same rights, basically what you're actually looking at from that perspective is that the data is correctly stored, is correctly processed. It's not, and all you're looking at from that perspective is that the data is actually not being misused, right? When it comes to privacy. one of the things that is actually quite pertinent when it comes to privacy and where you see a lot of the divergence is data brokerage, right? So today, some organizations, they have so much data about you, and they actually begin to start selling a lot of that data. So you look at a classical example will be the case with Facebook case when it came to the British company that was recently that was a couple of
Cambridge
years.
Analytics.
Pardon?
Cambridge Analytics.
Cambridge Analytica, exactly. So when you look at those cases, you're looking at the data brokerage piece. When people sign up on such platforms, they are not expecting, they are not, they give a certain piece of their rights around their data, but they are not actually expecting misuse of that data. When we look at data privacy and we look at data security, there's a lot of things in data privacy and data security that look very much alike. But where there is all of these things actually converge under one main theme, which is data protection. And actually, as you can see on the screen, data security being encryption, network security, access control, activity monitoring, breach response, DLP, and CASB. So you, most of us have been familiar with this for several years now. These are the basic foundations of building a correct or an accurate security program. But in the last couple of years, there are new terms that we've actually had to deal with. And anyone who is actually working on a data privacy program is actually asking these questions in terms of discovery of data, classification of data, regulations around the data, data subject access request, which is the DSARs, alerting. And alerting, when you're looking at alerting, it's more about if there's a breach of that data, how quickly should you be able to get that information out to the consumer? In when you look at alerting, even within the data security space, usually the alerting is more. It was previously more tied around if a company gets breached, they have a lot more time to be able to alert not the consumer per se, but to alert the authorities about the breach, and then there would be an investigation started. However, when you look at alerting in this case, there are specific stringent rights that have been written into regulations around alerting your consumers. And there are specific timelines that have also been given around that. This third piece is the fourth piece is actually around contracts. One thing that we also have to identify within a data privacy program is that when a customer comes to you and you're actually dealing with any customer, and in any case, in any situation whereby data is being exchanged, if say consumer A is giving their data to consumer B, is giving their data to company A. So let's just say Google as an example. So if you're actually giving your data to Google, and Google is actually also working with other third parties that it intends to share your data with, Google also has to make sure that those the contracts between those Google and then those third parties actually would transfer those same stringent requirements that it actually is affording its customers or its consumers, whether it be B2C or B2B, so business to business or business to consumer. And then the last thing really would be around policy. So policies around data privacy are actually a lot different from data security requirements. And the challenge today is that most organizations begin to end up mixing data privacy, calling their data security programs as data privacy programs and calling their data privacy programs as data security programs. What we actually intend to do actually with this slide is to show how these things merge into a data protection program. But then more importantly, you need to be able to call which is which, right? When you call data privacy, you should know exactly what you're talking about. When you call data security, you should also know exactly what you're referring to. So with this question, I'll be turning the next question over to to Avinash in terms of being able to talk about what are the five challenges in building a privacy program. We've talked about data security, we've talked about data privacy, but why are companies still interchanging these issues? What is the real or big challenge that companies face? And one area that I would also like to even push in there is in the era of COVID, where people are mostly working from home, how is this actually a big challenge?
Yep, thank you, Lenin. Before I get on to the top five challenges in building a privacy program, I want to give a quick analogy that I actually provide to a lot of people when they ask me, what's the big difference between data privacy and data security? So the analogy is very similar to a, let's say, there is an individual who is within a room, and you actually have a window to make sure that you're making sure that nobody unauthorized can come into the house or come into the room and collect the stuff. So window acts as a means for protecting, as a means for data security. And then let's say you have a window, and then that is protecting people from coming in and getting hold of any stuff in the room and things like those. And then, like a lot of times, you actually add a curtain to that window. That's basically data privacy. Basically, who has access to what's going on or what is present inside that room. So that's an analogy that we use that gives a very good clarification of the difference of what data security addresses and what data privacy addresses. Okay, coming to the top five challenges, right? Some of the challenges that we get into when we are trying to build a privacy program. So some of those challenges include, right, having to provide or have an inventory of all the data assets across all the enterprise. So what that means is, first thing first, if you want to do be it data privacy or even protect the data of be it data security or data privacy, one of the things that you would want to know is what all data you have and where all the data is actually present within your ecosystem of data stores. So that becomes a big one of the bigger challenges, whereas trying to get an understanding of what data you have, where all you have it. The thing is, whenever we talk about data inventory, people come up with programs wherein they start a program across all the enterprise, saying that, okay, now let's go and talk to all the data owners, be it the dev teams or people who are maintaining the systems, go and talk to say, okay, go let us know what all data you have in your databases, the databases that you work with. But the challenge with that kind of an approach is, right, that is a very manual, it's time consuming, and it's going to take forever. And then as soon as you complete that spreadsheet of what all data you have or the inventory of the data, that becomes almost, it becomes stale right away, because new data always gets created, new data gets inserted into your databases, new databases get created, new tables get created. That's a continuous process. So when we talk to a lot of organizations, one of the things that they fail to understand is how dynamic the data is, and how some of the things that inventory of data assets, trying to keep an inventory is such a huge challenging task. The other challenge, right, is the increasing scale at which data has organizations have been holding the data within their organization. So organizations generate a huge volumes of data. That does not come as a surprise. But what might be surprising is that the rate at which this data is being created within enterprise is growing at a very exponential rate. If you go back a few years ago, organizations typically had maybe a few gigabytes to terabytes of data sets. But then in the recent times, one of the things, the big trends is the organizations have terabytes to petabytes of data sets that they are storing. And then, right, the other bigger aspect of it is all the data that these organizations are collecting is now spread across a wide variety of different data stores. The things like right now with the adoption of cloud, basically things. Let's go look at this slide here. With the adoption of cloud, right, be it SaaS solutions, be it NoSQL solutions, and with all these solutions like Salesforce, MongoDB, Cassandra, Hadoop, that data that organizations have is spread across multiple different data centers. It could be something on the cloud, or it could be a SaaS offering where the data is getting stored. Organizations might be using Google Suite or Office 365. So the data that organizations have is very huge, and that all the data is now spread across all these different data stores. And trying to keep track of what data is present where is has become even more challenging or an impossible task in the recent times. And the other aspect, right, with all this big data and AI ML initiatives, right, what organizations been doing is they want to go and collect whatever data that they can get hold of, with the idea that okay, they never know when any of the data might be useful for any of their initiatives, for any of their big data, uh, uh, or any kind of the initiatives to help grow their business, monetize the data they have, or even enhance their business processes for any advantage that they can get, uh, any competitive advantage that they can get. And then, right, because of all these things, organizations getting a huge, collecting huge amounts of data sets. And then, right, almost every CIO or a CDO, chief digital officer, one of the things that are doing is they are trying to collect the data to help monetize the data sets too. And then, right, one of the challenges that comes up with a privacy program, which is coming and saying that okay, you need to make sure that you are not collecting this data, because that's not something that you had in your agreement with your customer, or you're going and selling the data to some third party. So a lot of these things become a challenging activity, because now the challenge with a lot of these chief privacy officers, CIOs, or chief digital officers, the challenge is that they will need to be able to balance the idea of taking advantage of the customer's data along with the risk that they are accumulating, be it from a compliance violations or be it from a data security side of the things. And then, right, one of the things that we have been seeing is with all the data that with all this data that organizations have been collecting, and various data breaches that we have come across a lot, right? The lot of these regulators have come up with a bunch of data privacy regulations, be it GDPR, CCPA. Almost every state in US right now is working towards a data privacy regulation, and that is something that now keep trying to keep track of what kind of regulation is requiring what kind of specific rights, or all it almost becomes almost impossible for a lot of enterprises to be able to keep up to be up to date on some of these things that are happening from a regulation standpoint. Uh, so those are some of the challenges that we typically come across in the enterprises in the recent times. And then, right, so some of these things, there are a lot of activity, lot of data privacy related initiatives that organizations are taking up, and there is a lot of things that are happening in industry to address some of these challenges that we are seeing within the industries, right, within the privacy industry right now. So, Lenin, from your experience and working in setting up security and privacy programs, are there specific things that organizations are doing to address some of these challenges?
So I think that the biggest thing that organizations need to start looking at is, I think that is very fundamental. And with data security or data privacy, one common theme that can cuts across the board is know thy data, right? So that is one principle that actually comes into play in terms of being able to know thy data, your data. You cannot protect what you cannot see, and that is basically fundamental to a lot of organizations. The big challenges that actually come into play, as Avinash mentioned, in terms of inventory of data across all the enterprise and stuff like that. But and I the key item that you're actually looking at here is the fact that you have data on in both structured and unstructured format. Some data could fit in your databases neatly, and you can basically run queries to get that data. But then now you have data in email, data from data and email, data in your network file shares, data on people's machines, data in all multiple places, including people's phones and all of that. um, Data on cloud, data on premise, and two other things that most people actually forget about when they are looking at data security is like HR systems. We are mostly focused on the consumer data, but there's not a lot of focus on the employee data. The last thing that would really want to call out when it comes to the sources or the systems that you're dealing with is the physical security systems or badge reader systems. Today, when you go to most organizations, they would ask you to sign in. You provide your ID, your identification, you put in your name and all of that. The question that comes into play is what we have seen is most of the time these systems are not connected to the organization's purview or under the purview of the chief security officer for those organizations. But this information is still being stored in a location, and if it's exploited, could also be able to show data that the organization does not really has not really been putting a lot of focus on protecting in that regard. The key item here when you look at all of this is data is being placed in multiple areas, multiple systems in different formats. The first thing, apart from being able to know that data, is being able to understand, being able to automate and collect all that data in a manner that it does not put the organization at risk. So today, if someone, or even if with, and a typical example will be something like a DSAR request, right? Data subject access request. So if a consumer today comes into your organization and says that, hey, I want you to give me all the data that you have about myself, or not just collect the data. That one, maybe you can first of all look at your databases, maybe you can look at other ways, entry points for collecting that data. But then the most difficult piece actually out of such request is when the consumer says that I want you to delete all my data from your systems. That is really the hard part, right? Because the challenge really with that is that first of all, you're copying your data into not just storing it on one system. You're actually duplicating that data on multiple systems. You might be copying or storing that data in different type of formats. You might also even have sent some of that data via email or through other communication systems. When you look at chat data, what other PII about that person is in your chat data or your marketing data, right? So when you look at all of these things, how do you actually go about getting some of these things addressed? So if a consumer says that delete all the data you have about me, then the question actually goes into where are all my systems that I have collected this consumer's data, and am I really sure that I'm actually deleting their data or attending to their request? So the next question, the key thing that we actually do in terms of being able to mitigate that risk or being able to meet those requests is the ability to automate the entire process, right? So regardless of what format data is or what systems you're actually looking at. So from your Salesforce environment to your AWS or Azure cloud, to your network file shares, to any of your databases, any place where your data could actually be stored, you need a system that can be able to automate the collection in real or near real time, all of that data in one place, so that you can be able to, when a customer sends in a DSAR request, it's basically as simple as someone, you can even automate the deletion of that process based off of by understanding exactly what system requirements are and things of that nature. But the first key is to be able to identify all of that data. When a consumer comes in and says, delete all my data, you should know exactly where that data is. So the first thing is the automation piece. The second piece that would be important out of all of this is greater visibility, right? So to be able to identify all of this, don't just put data in the cloud and forget about it. Don't just share data with other customers and forget about it. The key thing here is that when it comes to privacy, you're responsible for data, whether it's on your premise or with with another third party, right? Regardless of where that data is, it is your responsibility as an organization to ensure that you have visibility into all of the systems that could potentially have any of the data that a consumer that you're actually dealing with when it comes to data privacy. This third piece that you'd also want to look at is your ability to scale. So you're collecting petabytes of data, several gigs of data. How do you actually scale this capability, right? How are you going to be able to identify all of this numerous amounts of data that you're collecting? And if someone actually makes a request that give me all my data, how are you going to figure out how to collect all this data in a quick enough fashion that you can be able to quickly turn around those requests? And if you're getting multiple requests, how do you actually do that? So the scaling or capability around scaling is actually going to be very important when it comes to that capability. The third thing that I would also want to really for most organizations to focus on is about really identifying or changing the kind of tools that they have within the organization. So today, you see a lot of data security products on the market, and they talk about it talks about data privacy. They talk to you about, hey, we have something that a data privacy product, and majority of it is more around policies and procedures. And when you go beyond the policies and procedures, all they can actually do is, oh, we can only be able to access your PDF files, or we can only be able to access data in your databases. And this is not the forum to mention the products on the market, but basically these are the deficiencies that you currently see. So as you actually go out there and then look for a data privacy product, don't just look for you. We understand that data is not just stored in databases. So when someone comes to you and tells you that we can access your databases to have your data and that is all we do, that is completely inadequate in terms of being able to address a data privacy program. Or if they come to you and tell you that they can only address file shares, that is not adequate. You have data in file shares, you have data in images, you have data stored in AWS environments, you have data in Salesforce, you have data in Slack. You need a more than just one system type solution. You need a solution that is able to access or identify data in multiple stores. The last piece is being able to the governance component of it. How do you make sure that all of that data you have visibility into it? If your CEO or your CISO comes in and says that this person actually sent, or your legal team says this person sent in this request to have their data deleted, how do you actually even start, right? So the first thing is the governance component of it. how can you plug in basically just the ID of the consumer and be able to identify all of the systems that that consumer's data in, and making the process of being able to respond to data privacy requests from a 30-day, 45-day process to something that you can literally do in several seconds to just a few seconds to a minute. So those are the kind of things that we would want to look at when you're trying to build a data privacy program. And most importantly, know your regulations. Um, Different countries have different regulations. If you have data stored in multiple geographical locations, you need to understand what rules actually apply to that data. So not just the ability to ensure that your systems have the data, but also you need to apply different rules to different data sets, depending on what count. First of all, what country? Even in countries, different states have different regulations, and beyond that, different countries also have different data privacy regulations. So the geopolitical or geolocation of that data is also plays a very huge role in terms of being able to build a comprehensive data privacy program.
So
So
let one thing
with
that we keep hearing a lot in the recent times, something called as security by design or privacy by design. Can you elaborate on what exactly those terms are?
Yeah, so when you look at privacy by design, what you're actually looking at, security by design is what we've actually been talking about for probably almost 30 to 40 years now, right? So we talk about the concept of defense in depth. Um, so very similar concept in terms of that when it comes to privacy by design, right? So what you're looking at is being able to build privacy into, first of all, the way you collect data, the way you store data, the way you process data, the way you actually retain data, and then the way you dispose of data, and even the way you share data off with third parties, right? So the key thing here is that before you actually collect any data, you need to understand what the rules and regulations around that data is, and be able to build privacy not in proactively into the way you actually design your systems, not building privacy as an afterthought. So, in very simple terms, that is what you're looking at when you talk about privacy by design. Privacy has to be inbuilt in the same manner that you actually look at security by design. With that said, I would actually turn over to Avinash to talk about some of the pitfalls to avoid in building a program.
Yep. Thank you, Lenin. So a couple of things there, right? Some of the pitfalls that organizations fall into when they try to go build a privacy program include things like, right? People they understand that they need to go and protect the customer data, but then one thing that they miss out is any data that they have, be it their employees, be their staff, or any data that is pertaining to an individual falls under this privacy regulations and things that they need to do to help secure or protect the privacy of their customers or privacy of all of individuals that they have data about. So, right, one of the things is there are some ways how we can go about building a privacy program. Putting a strong, effective privacy program in place is not a simple task. It requires huge time commitment support of people. It requires a coordinated effort from people, processes, and all the tools to come together to be able to establish a strong and effective privacy programs that addresses the challenges that organizations have with respect to privacy. Basically, right, some of the steps that organizations need to take up to go on and build an effective privacy program include the first thing, you need to be able to go in and understand the current compliance or regulatory landscape from regulations that organizations or that apply to the industry that the organization is in. They need to understand these various rights, various rules, or various obligations that they have from a compliance standpoint. So there's right things could be things like I need to be able to go in and analyze the regulatory and the contractual requirements, review the legislative and requirements that they need to be having systems to be able to handle them. They need to be establish a budget and a roadmap to be able to go in and address some of the regulatory and compliance obligations that they need to comply with. And then right next one is the and then as we keep talking about data privacy, this uh, uh, data inventory of what data they have. One of the things like data discovery and data classification is a foundational building block to any data privacy program or any data privacy or a security program in general. The idea is that you need to be able to understand what all data you have, where all you have it, to be able to go and either protect it or make sure that you're securing those data sets. Understanding of what data you have, where you have it, who all has access to it, and where all this data is getting proliferated within the enterprise is something that's the core of any data privacy or the security program. So as part of that, right, basically what you're trying to address is you're trying to understand the risk you have with respect to all the data that you are storing within your ecosystem. Basically, like how many locations, how many databases contain your PR personal information of your customers, or sensitive information like credit card information, or social security numbers, or address information of your customers, employees, and so on. Basically, right, that's where one thing that will be very much required for any data privacy or data security program is having a data discovery or a data inventory of all the data that they have across all the systems they use within the enterprise. And then one of the things, right, to be able to go do establish a data privacy or a data security program, you would the orgs will the infosec and the privacy orgs will need to gain the executive support. They need to be able to go in and provide them or influence them, saying that okay, these are the things that needs to be in place and why they need to be in place, what are the challenges that they might get into by not having proper things like privacy by design, or not identifying the risks and the impact of not having the proper controls and processes in place while dealing with the data that they have. So gaining the executive support, that is something that is very much needed, because a lot of these kinds of things, be it security or privacy, as much as we want to go in and develop a privacy and security culture within the enterprise, a lot of these things will also need to be driven top down. And then, right, of course, there is also the budget requirements, or trying to get the proper training programs in place, or trying to get the proper changes into the way organizations work, be it from a development processes, or be it from the way the business processes need to be modified to be able to make sure that all these privacy and security concepts are imbibed into the regular business activities that they typically do. And then, right, one of the things with be it security or privacy or any initiatives in general, there needs to be we need to establish an accountability for that program. So one of the things, right, if everybody is accountable, that means that nobody is accountable for those specific things. So there needs to be something that needs to be there needs to be a certain org or certain person who is accountable for any of these security or privacy programs. So typically, a lot of these regulations like GDPR or CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, they mandate uh, uh, adding a new role called a chief privacy officer or chief data officer into the mix, who is actually going to be driving and who's accountable for all the data privacy or data security initiatives within an enterprise. And then, right, a few other things. A lot of times, organizations actually work with external third parties, and a lot of just because you have all the controls in place within your organization. Does not mean that you're actually protecting the data enough, in the sense that if you actually work with a third party and those third party has access to the data that is present within your enterprise, uh, we also need to make sure that the third parties are in compliance with all the data security and data privacy requirements that the organization is supposed to be compliant with. So that's where, right, we need to that requires to the need for developing a comprehensive approach while managing the vendor and the third party management, to make sure that the proper controls, proper contracts are in place, to make sure that the third party whoever has access to the data from the enterprise are doing the right thing to be it from both from security and the privacy controls. And then, right, the data privacy and data security programs in general will also need to go hand in hand with any kind of a data governance based initiatives that organizations are taking up. Things like whenever this program is going to affect, right, you will need to be able to monitor the program from time to time. Things like you need to be able to establish metrics at different steps of the data life cycle. Things like at the data creation time, or things like how many systems contain the social security numbers, how many systems contain credit card, or how many times a specific sensitive data element is getting proliferated across the enterprise. There needs to be some metrics and in place that help guide or even identify or govern the effectiveness of a privacy or a security program. So, Lenin, from your experience, right, what do you envision a good privacy solution to look like?
So in the interest of time, we would basically want to, what we will do is to combine both questions around the privacy solutions and then what we see as lacking on the market, and then we'll actually um, end that with the basically what Cogni offers that others do not. So what I would say in terms of privacy solutions, what a good privacy solution should look like, or what you should actually look at from the market perspective is everything that we've mentioned today. And when we talk about everything we've mentioned today, we talk about, first of all, the ability to actually do proper governance with a tool that can be able to give you the insights into all of that information. Secondly, the automation capability to be able to gather your sensitive data and then know exactly where it is. And then thirdly, you would also be looking at the ability to identify multiple data sets. So today there is a lack, most of the tools on the market today can only do either databases, or they can, when they say they do even do unstructured data sets, you quiz them further. They don't do text files, they don't do images, they don't do a whole lot of things. But when you go to most or multiple places, PDF files and stuff like that. But when you go to multiple places, what you're looking at is someone scans an image. We use images all the time, but even the top businesses or the top tools on the market do not give you that capability to identify that. The last thing that we would also want to do is understanding having a tool that actually not does not just localize, right? So a tool that just works within your internal environment, but a tool that can be able to also integrate with like API. So you deal a lot with third-party applications, Okta. You're doing with AWS. You are dealing with Salesforce. What system or tool is actually in place that can actually gather all these data sets, both internal, external, emails, whichever Google, whatever system that you actually have, file shares, file stores, whatever it may be, and give you that single pane of glass to see exactly what your data privacy footprint looks like. And in that, just to conclude on that, I'd like to turn this question back to Avinash to just give us, okay, why Cogni? Why should people be looking at Cogni? We've mentioned all these issues about what others do not do, but what does Cogni do, which is different?
Thank you, Lenin. So one of the things, right? Cogni is a data privacy, data security product built specifically to address some of these gaps that we've been seeing in the industry. So one of the basic things Cogni focuses on is Cogni starts with or tries to build on top of the four pillars of data privacy. Typically, things like, okay, what data do you have? Where is the data stored? Who is accessing this data, and whose data it is? That's how Cogni goes about doing the establishing some of these challenges that organizations face. So basically, right, so what is Cogni? So before we get into how Cogni does and what Cogni is, right? What does Cogni do? So Cogni at a very high level, it does three things. It discovers, secures, and monitors sensitive data within an enterprise. As part of the discovery functionality, Cogni connects to all your enterprise data sources, be it your relational databases, be it your NoSQL databases like MongoDB, Cassandra, or be it your cloud object stores like Amazon S3, Azure Blob Storage, or Google Cloud Storage, or your Dropbox or box.com services. Cogni connects to all these different data sources, and then it goes in and identifies what all data is getting stored and where all this data is getting stored across all these different systems. One of the things, right, that Cogni does is that no other product in the industry does does is Cogni not only looks at the textual data to identify what sensitive data is getting stored in there. Cogni looks at both structured, unstructured, and even binary data. Binary data could be things like images. If you have a scanned copy of a mortgage application or a scanned copy of a tax form that's lying somewhere on your network file share or on your object stores, Cogni can connect to those different data sources. It actually can tell you that, okay, there is a tax form or W9 or a W2 document that's lying on your network file share on your object stores. One thing, right, as some of the challenges that Lenin pointed out, Cogni not only looks at data stores. Cogni actually can take a look at all the email systems, be it your Office 365 or Google Suite. It looks at the Google Drives or SharePoint Online. Cogni connects to all the wide variety of different data sources that we typically come across within an enterprise, and it actually can go in and do automatic data discovery and classification across all these different data stores. And then, right, once we Cogni goes in and discovers and identifies what all data that organizations have and where all the data is getting stored, Cogni also provides mechanisms to go help secure the data. Securing could be things like masking data, encryption, tokenizing. It could be masking the data within a database, or it could be things like masking sensitive data within a document. It could be things like a scanned copy of a tax form or scanned copy of a W9. So Cogni can actually can go and look at the document, tell you that that's a W2 document, and it actually can even go in and mask or redact the sensitive data in the images. And then last but not the least, right, Cogni also continuously monitors these data sources to make sure that there is no sensitive data leakage or proliferation that's going on within the enterprise. Things like data from your databases, is it ending up in your log files? One of the typical challenges or problems that we come across, or typical use cases that we come across with a lot of enterprises is when you're doing development, you actually add a debug statement, and then you forget to take out the debug statement, and that debug statement ends up in your production system, and you end up logging all this sensitive data about your customers into the log files. So Cogni can identify such kind of things. It actually can scan your code repos. It can actually scan your log files and actually can tell you that, okay, this data is getting proliferated from this database to a different database, or database from a or from one database to a network file share, or things like those. Cogni can establish or identify those kinds of data proliferations that we typically see within an enterprise, and it can alert you before it becomes a big issue. So basically, right, Cogni, from a privacy standpoint, Cogni helps with data and data and system inventory. So basically, Cogni will also even identify what all systems you have. Cogni has the ability to go in and tell you, like, okay, there's a database that's running under the desk of an individual. It can actually identify what databases are running, what systems are running, and what all data those systems contain. And it provides mechanisms to help with masking, encryption, and then also with data subject access requests. So basically, from CCPA, GDPR, or almost all the newly coming up data privacy regulations, one thing that's common there is they're providing a right to the customer, wherein a customer can go in and say, okay, show me all the information that you have about me. And they can even invoke their right to deletion, saying that, okay, I don't want to do business with your organization anymore, go ahead and delete all my data that you have. So those are some of the things that privacy or privacy orgs are coming are trying to address. And Cogni actually has a lot of these things automatically built within it, where given a specific individual, Cogni, as part of the scanning it does, it actually can tell you what all data about that individual has, that is getting stored across various systems that are within an enterprise. So right, that's where Cogni has a few mechanisms where Cogni can help with this data subject access request automation. So how is Cogni different? How is Cogni different from all the tools that are out there within the market? So one of the things, right, Cogni has a comprehensive data type coverage. Basically, Cogni can scan your files, RDBMS, email, servers, images, and one of the things that Cogni uh, is built on a big data kind of a tech stack. And it Cogni actually can go in and scan huge amounts of be it your petabytes or terabytes of data without any issue at all. It addresses the challenges that typical organizations face with respect to amount of data that they have been accumulating over a period of time. And a few other things to add there, right, are Cogni has automatic self-learning and built into it. Basically, what it means is as Cogni goes and scans the data within an enterprise, it actually learns from the feedback, learns from the data it actually saw, and it will adapt its models and its likelihood scores accordingly based on the amount of data it sees. That's where as Cogni gets installed or deployed within an enterprise, it goes in and as it sees more and more data, it only gets better and better at its automatic classification or mapping of the data for various individuals within the enterprise. And then right, so that's where Cogni is a very comprehensive tool that can help with almost all the data privacy, data security programs that we typically come across within an enterprise. Okay, so anything you would want to add, Lennon?
I think that we have, yeah, you've actually mentioned the key items, and I think is we can actually switch over to questions at this time.
Okay. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining the call. If you have any questions, feel free to put them on the Q&A section of and let us know, and we can try to answer those questions. We have a few minutes, so we have at least 5 minutes. So, if you have any questions, uh, please send them our way. Okay. So here's one of the question that came up. Uh, Lenin, can you talk about any privacy trends that we are seeing in the recent times?
So in terms of what I would, the question is actually broad, um, but if you're looking at trends, I think that the one major trend that you're actually seeing within the privacy spaces, you actually are seeing a lot more companies, a lot more states or countries actually not just having privacy rules and regulations, but also actually enforcing those rules. When you look at in the U.S. alone, over 16 states have different privacy trends at different states at different levels or different states in terms of being able to become law within those states. The second thing that I would actually one trend that we would also want to start looking at is within the COVID era, and that is something that we'll probably would want to start thinking through. Everyone is working from home. Majority of the time, they're actually connecting to web systems and things of that nature. um, how are the privacy rules actually playing out there when you're actually not really connecting through your organization's VPN, or if you're connecting through your organization's VPN, how are you actually dealing with data that you're actually sharing a lot more with third parties? The last thing that I see as a trend also within the spaces, and this is something that just came out about 2 or 3 days ago. So H&M, which is basically a global fashion retailer, H&M was actually sued 44 million US dollars by the EU GDPR board, right? And the reason was that they were collecting data about their employees. So, which is the reason why we actually bring out the question that privacy is not just data that you're collecting about your consumers or your customers, but data that you're actually collecting about your employees as well could also have a play into things of that nature. So, in general terms, most people think, okay, it's just data you're collecting about employees, about consumers. But today, with what happened a couple of days ago with a $44 million fine, this is actually changing the trend in terms of what organizations should actually start looking into. So beyond just collecting data about yourself or just collecting, identifying data about consumers, the question that you also need to be to actually start understanding is what about the HR systems that you currently have in place? What data is it collecting about your employees? Health data, location data, whatever things, basically more things about themselves. How is that data also being protected? So those are the major things that we're seeing within the privacy space.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. The next question is, can Cogni work with the real-time data as well? Absolutely. So Cogni can work with any streaming data, or it could be data that's coming through, be it Kafka. So Cogni can integrate with any of these consumers and can help with both discovering or securing the data as it moves through the pipeline. The next question is Cogni on-premise solution or cloud-based? Cogni is not a SaaS solution. It's not a software as a service solution, but Cogni gets deployed wherever the organization's data sets are, be it on-premise or be it on the cloud. So Cogni, wherever the data sets are, Cogni can be deployed, but it is not a software as a service solution, given the nature of the sensitive data that Cogni deals with as part of the discovery securing aspects. Any
So
other
one thing I'd
question?
like to add to
Yeah,
so
go on,
one thing
Lennon.
I'd like to add to that is the fact that you when Cogni is deployed, the company, whoever buys Cogni, basically controls that data. So it's not within our purview as to Cogni doesn't control any of that data. We don't store any of that data. So it's actually built and stored within your environment. The difference is that Cogni can be integrated or can work with cloud systems or cloud solutions. So AWS, Azure, both software as a service like Office 365, Salesforce, and then any of the Slack, and then any of these solutions which require APIs. Cogni is fully API, so it can basically integrate with any of these third-party services that most organizations or most consumers are using. So that in a nutshell, Cogni actually addresses all of your data, regardless of which format or which way that data is exposed to your organization.
Thank you, Lennon. I think that's our last question. So thanks everyone. Thanks for joining our discussion today. Looking forward to meeting you guys again in any of the future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.